Hey, how you guys doing today? All right, all right, all right. Today is the 15th of August and 2020, and I'm just hollering at you from downtown Los Angeles. You know, there's a lot going on in the country right now, as we all know. There's a lot of information that's coming in at us from all different sources. I mean, social media sites and videos, and everybody's posting things. You got cable news at night. You got, the news during the day and throughout the night. You got the cable news, and then your local network news, and then you're getting it off the radio. You're getting a word of mouth, and so everybody's just talking and talking. And we're just getting all this craziness. And right now we're dealing with the racial unrest, if you will. So I wanted to just throw something really super fast about the Black Lives Matter movement. I don't want to take anything away from the Black Lives Matter movement or the Black Lives Matter slogan, if you will. I would like to add to it if I could. So this is just one man's opinion. I'm not a guru of any sort about anything. And so, there's a lot of anger out there, and the Black Lives movement is touching a lot of nerves, hitting a lot of nerves with people. And I think what we really need to do is just kind of slow everything down and just take things step by step and peel away some certain layers and see where we come out with. It's funny because I just walked down to Rouse's getting some food. I'm going to Miami tomorrow for a month, but I'll shoot some recordings out from there, hopefully on the beach. And when I was coming out of Ralph's, I saw 3 African American females. They looked to be about in their early 20s, maybe 22, 23-ish. And they were dressed really nice, had their hair made up. And, and it just kind of hit me looking at them. And they just remind me of so many African American women that I've known over the years from different parts of the country. And it made me wonder, and it kind of goes into how we're so far off on some of these things. Because, I don't know where these females were from. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, and so I've had the ability to interact with a lot of different types of people, culturally, religiously, ethnically, both genders. And so, I've been fortunate in that way just because of work that has allowed me to do that. But it made me wonder, I'll just take one of the females. Could this female relate to a ultra-conservative Republican white male from Missouri, where I'm from, maybe 30, 40 years old, flag waving, gun toting, hunter, fisherman, living with his guns and his pickup truck and his dogs and all that. Could she relate to him at all? And on the flip side, obviously, could he, in his upbringing and his background and who he is, could he relate at all to the African American female from the inner city? So you got one from way far from the spectrum over here and one way at the other end of the other spectrum over here. And we wouldn't know. You're probably thinking, no, they have nothing in common, and no, they would not be able to, if we talk to them separately and maybe had one across the room from the other and see where they were at with just their perception of the other person. So just like race relations, how could you bring those two together without having anything mean-spirited or hateful coming out of their mouths? In other words, if we sat them across from a table from each other and we said, I'd like you to, just by what you know of this person, this brief little biography that we just gave you, this little bio on both sides, and what is your impression of the other person, and maybe what you think their beliefs might be, or how they feel about your race and your culture and let both of them, of course, obviously the ladies go first, uh, let her kind of say what she needs to say and let him say what he needs to say. Now, maybe they'll be afraid to open up, but just like race relations, that is what is needed. If we could ever get to a point where those two could come together, and I just picked these two, it could be any different types of people from different cultures and different backgrounds. Just like you could have a Christian and a Jewish person and a Muslim in the room, and let them kind of throw out there what their thoughts are regarding the other person's religion and see where it goes. But that's kind of how you would, conflict resolution 101 is to bring the parties together to see what their views are, see what their prejudices are, and see what their stereotypes are, and see what their biases are, because we all have them, and peel away and let it all come out. And it's getting to know and understand. And you know what? It's completely okay that they're so far apart. That's the beauty of the United States of America, that we're the melting pot. And a lot of people haven't accepted that yet. I understand that. I mean, you look at photos of, I was looking at some kids in school in China, and the whole class is Chinese kids. There's no diversity there. And if you look at maybe in some African countries, all the kids are African. Or if you look at, some kids in Sweden are all white kids. This country, it's like a new experiment that we're trying to get used to. And there's going to be some bumps, there's no doubt about it. There's going to be a lot of growing pains. We're a very new country compared to other countries. And when you throw in the melting pot issue, and then the bad history, that's where we need to get to. We need to get past that bad history in order to really get this melting pot where it needs to be. So that was kind of just an interesting thought I had when I was walking down the sidewalk, that's kind of where we are with race relations. Is we're not sure about the other side. We don't really trust them. We don't know them. We don't really understand them. And one thing I would say to the African American community is, please give the white community a little bit of wiggle room. Please give us a little bit of room to fall down, because I'll tell you why. The white community is not experienced and are very ignorant. And again, ignorance is not a bad word. It just means you don't know of something when it comes to race relations and racism and racial issues. Now, not to say that there's not in the white community that doesn't understand that, but I would just simply say the majority probably don't, because it's really not. It hasn't been really an interest of the white community, and it doesn't affect us the way it does the African American community. I mean, the African American community have been dealing with this subject of racism for not even years or decades, for centuries. And so they're passing down this information to their children and grandchildren, and then they do the same. The white community doesn't do that. I never spoke to my parents about race. It was never even brought up. And I've never even met my grandparents. So we just really don't, when we see something and it's like, oh, it's so ugly. So this is all so ugly, and the white community wants to get rid of it. We don't want it. We don't want to be part of hate groups. We don't want to be racist. We don't want to be discriminators. We don't want to be that George Wallace back in the day. We just want all of that gone. We want peace and harmony. We want to get along with the black community and all the non-white community. And so please be a little understanding that there's not a lot of people in our community that are scholars in this subject matter that can talk about it. And so we kind of just, bury our head in the sand, and it's very hard for you to get past even the issue itself, because you can't even have a conversation with anyone. There's no one even to have a conversation with. So hopefully that's going to change, and hopefully, and I know it will, and I know everything's going to be great. It's just going to take a little time, and we got to get some things set up, and we'll have that conversation, and we will start moving things in the right direction. I think if Joe Biden can become president and he sets up a commission on race, I think it can start from there. So, but one thing I wanted to just kind of throw out there before I end this is, any subject matter where we have an opinion or we have, thoughts and feelings about it, when it does come up, And everyone is going to have a say or an opinion on race relations. And the reason is because it affects all of us deeply. It's part of our DNA. It's part of who we are as people. You know, and it's like when black people see white people attacking and beating up other black people, it makes them very angry inside, even though they might not even know the person, because that's them that's being beat up and attacked. And the same thing, everything is the same thing. It's just going to be flipped over. The numbers will be different, but we're all humans, so we're all going to be doing the same things, just on a different scale. So when white people see black people beating up a white person, they get very angry. We all do. So we don't want to even do those kinds of things, and we want to completely disavow and completely condemn any type of violence towards each other. So I want to just kind of start with this one piece before we get into the police brutality and the second issue, which is systemic racism or institutionalized racism. So those are the two topics I think that we're trying to focus on. But one of the more important, I wouldn't say more important, but one of the important points of trying to get this thing figured out and fixed is the information aspect. Where are we getting this information from? Who is teaching us? Who is telling us what is what? Who is driving the narrative? Who is painting the picture? So if the media that is very strong, and now with social media it's even stronger, and it's scary because you have a lot of false information that's being put out there purposely to make things even worse and harder for us. So that's something we have to keep in mind. But we must understand that these news outlets and news medias, they're a for-profit operation. These organizations are huge, and there's someone back there behind this curtain. Maybe it's the Wizard of Oz. There's somebody back there pulling the strings and telling what stories are to be put out and what stories are not. And I can tell you, as being a former newspaper man in my teen years, selling door to door, I was a salesman, and I read it every day, and I know it sells. And chaos and disorder to these people sells. It's unfortunate, but that's the way they think. Love, peace, and harmony doesn't sell anything. And so the information that we're getting from the media is so important. It is so important. And so when we talk about Black Lives Matter, where did that come from? How did that even start? What is this even about? So you might ask some, 70-year-old woman in the Midwest, and she might not even know what it is or what it means or how it started, and she's going to be ignorant of the whole thing. She might just go by some things she saw on the news. So Black Lives Matter came out of anger from the black community because they kept seeing from the media stories and videos, and the stories were real, but they kept seeing stories about unarmed black men being killed by police officers needlessly. And all of the times that we've seen, I think, were white police officers that were killing black men who were unarmed. And so that anger started that movement. I believe it happened after Michael Brown. It could have been starting already, Trayvon Martin. But so that's kind of where that came out of. And I think the where they got a little negative look towards them was, I guess there was a group that was marching or crossing a bridge or something of that nature, and they were saying fry the pigs and things of that nature. Now the Black Lives Matter organizers were saying that was not them, that was just people that latched on to the march, and that was not part of their group. And so people maybe have already got their minds made up because of that, and now we're turned off by that organization. But the movement itself was due to the anger that and rightfully so, from the black community when they continually see people in their community being killed by police officers. And we know some of them were absolutely horrid and ridiculous. I mean, the last one with George Floyd was just, that was a nightmare. I mean, that was just the worst I've ever seen in my life. And so you had that one there, which was horrible. There was another one where, forgive me, I don't know the gentleman's name, but he got out of the car because of a traffic stop, took off running, and the officer just ran behind him and shot him in the back and killed him, and then tried to lie and say that the guy was trying to attack him, not knowing somebody was filming it. And so when you have these stories out there, and not only what you see on the news, but they've been experiencing in their neighborhoods for ever since the beginning of time, it just adds to that fire. It just adds to that to that story, and it's that picture that was painted. And so I get where the media wants to show that this is going on, maybe to the white community, so that the white community will start finally understanding and realizing that, hey, this stuff is real. I mean, they've been telling us this and nobody's paying attention, nobody's saying anything. But if the media either leaves out information or guides the questions or the narrative or the picture in a certain direction, then that's almost a falsehood. It's almost a false story. It's not fake, but it's well, I don't want to say fake news. So it's not a false story. It's half there. And so if you only have half of the story, that could then lend itself fuel to the anger that we've been seeing out in the streets for the last few months. And so that's where the media could really do a great service to race relations in this country if they try to figure out a way to balance it out and not just paint a one-sided story, a one-sided picture. Propaganda is like you're telling half a story, purposely leaving out the other half in order to further an agenda. So I don't know what their agenda is. I don't know if they're afraid to put anything with regards to white Americans in that mix, for fear that they might be either pandering or they're trying to water down the events that are happening in the black community, so they just don't even touch it. But to me, it's very, very important that they put other information in there regarding this issue, because if not, it can cause more damage than they could even imagine. And so, not to say that the anger would go away or there wouldn't be any anger or that there shouldn't be any anger, but again, the white community is not reading up on this and the black community is not hearing it. That's a huge problem. So you'd have to ask yourself why, little thing there on the screen, why they're not giving out that information. So let me just throw something your way really quick. And again, this has nothing to do with the dirty D's. I'm not here to defend, I'm not here to deny, to deflect, or to debate something to death. I'm here to support the movement and to support the black community when it comes to police, the way they've been treated. I mean, I can go back to the 80s. I mean, I was, troubled by a lot of these stories where people are getting shot and there's no weapon. And the storyline was, well, he was reaching for his waistband. He made an aggressive move quickly, and I thought he was going to pull a gun. He had a submarine sandwich in his hand with the aluminum foil, and it looked like a weapon. He pulled out his wallet, and I thought he was pulling out his gun, and I shot and killed him. Well, you still have to be held accountable. If you kill someone who doesn't have a gun, then that's a horrible mistake you made. And so sometimes there was one gentleman, he couldn't hear what they were saying. He didn't even speak English hardly. It was in the dark, and he was trying to show him that he lived there, and he was up on his porch, and it was in New York City years back. He was an African immigrant. I think he had 20, 30 bullets shot at him. So when you keep hearing this over and over again, it just becomes the narrative, and there is no other narrative. So if I threw something out there to say, and I don't think the black community knows this, because I've seen a few reporters out on the streets, independent reporters or independent wannabe journalists, asking some young black males these questions, and they didn't know. And of course they didn't know, because no one's telling them. And that's the problem. So if I told you that more white people are killed by police every year than black people, why wouldn't you know that? Not that that would make a difference, not that you would even care. But why don't you know that? That more white people are killed by police than black people or Hispanic people. In fact, double the amount. So let's just take the last 5 years. If I'll round it off, if I just said 2,500 white people were killed by police, and in the same time frame, 1,200 black people were killed by police. I would be shocked if you knew that, because I didn't know it. And so if the media is not telling that portion of killing of peoples, citizens, whatever they are, if they're not telling that, they're leaving it out. And so the image then becomes that white police officers only kill black people. And we don't even know how many black police officers out of the 2,500 were responsible for the deaths of white people. So I'm not even going to get into that. I mean, it's irrelevant. So it would be interesting to know. So that's one thing right there. So white people are killed by police every year than black people. Now, the second part of that, which is also true, is that blacks and Hispanics are disproportionately killed by police at a higher rate than whites. So they're killed at 2.5 to 3 times at a higher rate than white people. They're both true, but you're only hearing one of it, one side of that. Because why would you tell the black community that more white people are killed than black people? Why would someone do that? So I saw an article, a headline, a couple of weeks ago, and it was by 2 females who were writing it. I don't know what race they were, but the headline said just that. It said, blacks are killed at a disproportionate rate, at 2.5 times by police than white people. So when a black person reads that, what do you think he's thinking? What do you think is going through his mind? He sees black as the victim, police and white people as the perpetrators. So that's a problem. Why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just simply put them both in there, which both are true, to balance out the story a little bit? Although more white people are killed by police each year than black people are killed at 2.5 times the rate than white people. So in other words, if 2,500 white people were killed and 1,250 black people were killed, based on their population numbers, that should be half of that. It shouldn't be 1,250, it should be like 600. But then you also have to take into consideration, because the disproportionate rate that they're talking about is based on the 13% overall population of the United States. But if you took geographically the areas that we're speaking of where these killings are taking place, it could alter that statistic, because you have certain areas where population-wise you might have at 85-90% African Americans living in that area where these deaths are occurring. So again, if the media is painting a picture that isn't fair, what it's doing is it's stirring the pot. It's stirring the racial divide in this country. And they have to be doing it on purpose. I don't understand that. So the funny thing was, a week after I saw that, President Trump is being interviewed, and I didn't vote for President Trump, but he's being interviewed, and that came up. The question wasn't disproportionate rate. It was, the reporter asked, why are black people still being killed at the hands of law enforcement? Now, it's not a silly question. I don't want to say it's a stupid question, because I don't like being negative like that. let's just say it's a very uneducated question. First of all, what could you possibly answer to that question? There is no answer. And so she's kind of setting it up for a failure right off the bat. And, the same reason that white people and Hispanic people are being killed by police each year. You'd have to look at each case and see why. Now you're talking huge amounts of pies and charts and graphs to try to break it down even more. So President Trump says to her, so are white people, more white people. Again, he didn't elaborate properly. And she didn't really follow up and say, well, what do you mean by that? And they could have had a discussion about it. And then more people would have been educated on what is the disproportionate rate mean? What do you mean more white people are killed by police than black people? And go into the story a little bit more. Instead, she throws out a question and trying to almost like a I got you question that really didn't even have an answer. And I think he even said it's a nasty question. But he doesn't know how to speak properly about these issues, and so it didn't go anywhere. And then the media the next day said, President Trump had made a statement about more white people being killed while disproportionately, and they went right back into the disproportionately part of the statistic. It's true, they're both true. But why leave one out? Because you're painting a picture to the black community that makes the white community look very bad. Like, first of all, we know it's mostly white police officers that are doing the killing because the majority of police officers are white and they're working in black neighborhoods. So your chances are you're going to have that racial makeup of a white officer and a black subject. On top of that, which no one talks about, 95% of all the killings by police, both black and white, so it affects both communities, or it's true about both communities, 95% of the people killed, both black and white, 95% were armed. So the narrative that the media is painting that white police officers are killing black people that are not armed at a disproportionate rate. And we keep seeing story after story after story. And pretty soon it's, let's take to the streets, because we're going to take it into our own hands. And I don't know if the media is doing that in order to be out there with their cameras and, keep that chaos and disorder theme going. I don't know. But that's an interesting plus tax statistic. I didn't know that either. And the black community doesn't know it. And the white community doesn't know it. How come we don't know these things? Because no one's telling us. And so that's why we have to do our own research on this stuff now. So now we have to start educating ourselves better so that we can understand and have a conversation civilly. Another thing, police officers brutalize. There's police brutality in the white community. It's not just in the black community. Police officers commit police brutality in white neighborhoods. I was a victim of police brutality more than twice. I ended up in the hospital twice because of it. And one was a serious injury. I was handcuffed both times. I was not resisting. One, I kind of threw out a pig, and the attack started by a black police officer, and then other white police officers joined in, handcuffed in the back of the car, defenseless. Another one, I'm standing in front of the car, he's telling me to get in, I'm trying to explain myself only, wasn't fighting or kicking or screaming or spitting or being disrespectful, and a Maglite flashlight comes over my face, full on like a baseball swing of a bat, and hits me in my eye, almost blinds me, and then to rush me to the hospital. My mom said after the Rodney King incident, if we would have known then back what we know now, we would have sued the hell out of them. But the black community is like, you're not going to know about my case. And out of the 2,500 killings of white people by police officers, does anyone know of any of these cases? Can you name 2 of white people that were killed needlessly by police and nothing was done. They weren't even acquitted. I can tell you 3 or 4 right now, right off the bat. But you don't know of them. So the black community doesn't know that white police officers are brutalizing people in the white community. The black community and the white community do not know that more white people are killed by police every year than black people. White people do not know the disproportionate rate of killings of black people by police officers. We don't even know what the racial breakdown is of who's killing who, how many black police officers are involved in killing white subjects, how many white police officers are involved killing white subjects and black subjects. We don't know a lot of these things. And so it's very frustrating that we don't know. And to me, this is what helps stir the racial divide. The media has got to be more responsible, and they've got to lay this information out there so that everybody can kind of see and wade through it and say, wow, I didn't know that. Okay. So they're not just seeing black people being killed by white people. I mean, it's got to stop. Otherwise, we will never move this ball further down the field. So whenever you see a story, listen to it very closely and peel away the layers and see if you walk away with all of the information that you could possibly have at your disposal. And the last thing I would say is, media, mix it up. I've got on my phone right now videos of heartwarming stories between blacks and whites and different races of people where they're helping someone, or they're donating a heart, or they're crying and hugging and loving each other. They're helping each other, blacks helping whites, whites helping blacks, and you never report it. It's buried at the bottom. It's just senseless. It's just ridiculous. Can you give us some better stories than what you're giving us? Because it just seems it's very one-sided, it's very slanted, it's very prejudicial, and it is really stirring that pot, that racial divide. So thanks for listening, guys, and I'm off to Miami.